Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is What If Naruto Had Harem with Mikoto and Sasuke Part 2. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Uchiha Compound. Morning in the Uchiha compound that day was not as quiet as Sasuke was used to as she groaned in bed. Faint voices murmured veiled words through her door. Although she didn't know exactly what the conversation was, she knew the two culprits of it. Naruto and Mikoto were in the kitchen, probably eating breakfast together as had become the custom in the house since Naruto was used to waking up in his own time. It didn't take long for the boy to find out when his adoptive mother would wake and he too would follow suit so he could talk to her, be near her. Naruto had been starved of social stimulation since he was born and he was eager to make up for that lost time, something of which Mikoto happily embraced as it was the first time she had a helper in the kitchen. When it came down to his cooking skills, he left a lot to be desired. However, as Sasuke remembered, it didn't take long before Mikoto stopped his ramen breakfast spree quick. Before the girl could realize it, Naruto was making a breakfast to rival feasts her mother had prepared in the past. Mikoto had never been so proud. The same timeline would have happened for Sasuke, but her father made her focus more on schoolwork, and surpassing her brother was already an impossible task that left no room for teaching her how to cook. Geez. Their bonding time always wakes me up. Sarcasm dripped as she crawled out of bed with only an oversized t-shirt acting as her cover. Today was the day she, along with the rest of the class, would take their graduation exam. Although they kept the details secret, Sasuke was confident both her and Naruto could pass easily. At least I hope the baka does. It wouldn't do if when we got married I was Jonin and he was still a genin. Giggling at the thought, dressing in her usual school look was as quick as it was simple. As always, she wore her high-collar blue shirt with the Uchiha crest stamped proudly on the back. With the shirt taken care of, it was then onward to her tougher choice, a short skirt that came to her mid-thighs or her usual beige shorts. Thinking better of changing the routine for such an uneventful day, Sasuke decided to wear the skirt tomorrow to indicate her fresh start as a genin. Slipping on her blue sandals, Sasuke headed toward the bathroom to check just what her hair had in store for her today. She looked into the mirror to see that other than a few stray hairs, her long and flowing dark blue hair was still in good shape. It wasn't long before she began to play with it, tying it into pigtails before almost vomiting. To redeem herself, she tried a ponytail that her mother sometimes wore but thought that could also be done a later date. The Uchiha settled for her usual look and decided to see what the commotion was all about with those two finally, as they had just about resorted to yelling her name. The halls reverberated her covered feet and told the two in the family room she was on her way. What do you two want? Sasuke stopped mid-sentence as she saw the two sitting across from each other enjoying their meal, staring at her for her loud interruption. Sorry, I didn't realize you had stopped talking. She mumbled in apology. Mikoto beamed at her daughter. All she could see was progress, and progress. Though her daughter had lost some of her more girlish manners as age passed, Mikoto was still proud to see that her daughter had not lost her feminine touch. Sasuke-chan, so nice of you to join us. Sasuke glanced at her mother and just gave a HN in response to her prodding. Yeah, well, I bet even if I hadn't come in you two would still be enjoying yourselves. You get along really well. Sasuke looked at Naruto, who had been quietly eating, silently laughing at the situation. Tch, mama's boy. Naruto had the decency to hide his blush with a loud slurp of his soup brought all the way to his face. Mikoto giggled at his reaction. It was true he spent most of his time at the compound with her. Not that she minded though, in fact she quite enjoyed having such a happy face to welcome her home. It was much different than the past, something Mikoto did very well at not focusing on anymore. I have enough problems these days to worry about what happened 6 years ago. Mikoto took a small sip of green tea to clear her thoughts about the CRA and her stress from maintaining their clan's status. Meeting after meeting regarding Uchiha this, Uchiha that, proposal options here, children there. I could make a profession out of denying the elders every turn I got to speak. It's just become so stressful I almost wonder if telling them would do any good. You know, it's almost like you two are the married ones. This time it was Mikoto's turn to show a reaction, spitting out her green tea back onto her plate in Naruto. Naruto was about to laugh at Sasuke's joke when he got green tea all over his black shirt and looked to see an embarrassed and blushing Mikoto quickly set her cup down and cover her mouth in embarrassment. "I'm so sorry Naruto-kun, hang on I'll get a towel." She ran off into the kitchen as the siblings exchanged glances, not understanding her odd reaction. "Moms, weird. I'll have to remember this. Ka-san has a thing for Naruto." The siblings agreed to their thoughts as Mikoto ran back in and began to clean Naruto's face and shirt with her towel. It wasn't that much but enough that it would be uncomfortable to leave and Naruto would definitely be wearing another shirt today. "Hey Ka-sa." Naruto was cut off as she continued to dab his skin and shirt with the towel vigorously and he figured she was really taking this badly. "Miko-chan, it's fine I can handle it." Mikoto realized she looked a bit too overzealous in her redemption and blushed in embarrassment at just how close her son was to her. "No, it's not like that. They don't really know about the engagement, it was just a figure of speech." "Why yes. You are right Naruto, here take it." Naruto proceeded to take the towel and clean himself off as Sasuke enjoyed her breakfast, thoroughly enjoying the interaction after the conclusion she came to in her thoughts. "But leave the shirt when you leave for school, I will clean it for you." Naruto let out a sigh but nodded. The woman would not take no for an answer so he gave in as usual. He set down the towel and proceeded to take off his t-shirt he had been wearing to bed, decent only thanks to his boxers. Both Uchiha women shook their heads at his nonchalant take on manners but ignored it as they wanted to escape the strict rules the house had been under in the past. They wanted to lighten up a bit and even take in a little of Naruto's happiness, except of course they weren't willing to strip down to their undergarments in the house. Regardless, Naruto had greatly influenced their lives and so far it was for the better. Sasuke and Mikoto both had recovered from any sort of long-lasting symptoms of depression that the village doctors had expected. Naruto had also improved both his social and ninja skills since being inducted into the Uchiha, all culminating with the implant of his Sharingan eyes. "Okay Ka-san, I'll go get a new shirt and Sasuke and I can go. We have our big test today." Mikoto suddenly remembered as her daughter rolled her eyes, it wasn't as big of a deal as he made of it. "That's right, you two will be taking your final step to Genin. I'm so proud," she gushed, already thinking of a way to reward them for how far they had come. "It's not that big of a deal Ka-san. The tests so far have been a joke. They actually figure the jutsus they teach us will be challenging, but Naruto and I learn them the first time we see them without a Sharingan." Mikoto laughed at her daughter's expense, her frustration was nothing less of what was expected of an Uchiha prodigy. "Try to be more understanding like your brother Sasuke-chan, he knows how important they are in the future of your ninja career." Naruto shrugged, he didn't think much of the techniques but if his Ka-san was happy he was too. "Please, Naruto could care less than I do." Sasuke droned but Mikoto dutifully ignored her, remembering the sad event that befell Naruto 6 years ago that led him to not having a Sharingan. Naruto had yet to take advantage of the ability, even once. It was because when he first attempted to use them, he promptly almost fainted from the pain and chakra usage. No single jutsu up until that point had affected Naruto like that, but he knew that it wasn't really chakra exhaustion but his body's difficulty in getting used to the new organs. There was also the fact to consider that no one else, not even his family, realized he had these Sharingan eyes. Mikoto along with the elders and Hokage were the only ones who stood in on his operation of Fugaku Uchiha's eyes transferring to his body. While the operation was a success, upon fully linking the eyes to be compatible with the body, the red Sharingan disappeared back into a sky blue albeit with a slightly darker tint. The elders were outraged and demanded to know what happened while the medics had no explanation. It seemed as if Naruto's body rejected the eyes dojutsu and shut it off, permanently. As Naruto was unconscious for his recovery, it was then he learned exactly why that happened and what he had yet to reveal to his family for their own safety. Naruto had begun to wrap his head around what Kyuubi said when he was younger. Now that he had a grasp of a ninja's life, strong shinobi were historically hunted and fought over for their power. Of course they kept their own will and often ended fighting both sides of the tug of war, but one could not make their life like that. That was what led the Senju and Uchiha together into Konoha's founding. They could no longer take the tug of war that forced their clans to go against one another by villages and countries. Naruto would use his Sharingan to protect his important people. That was all that mattered to him in the end anyway. He would go all out to protect the two girls in front of him, no matter if it cost him his life. I'll die to keep that love intact. Naruto, are you okay? You spaced out for a moment. Mikoto looked at him worriedly as he just stood in the doorway looking at them with a blank stare. He shook his head clear and waved off to the two. Yeah, just got lost for a moment there in thought, I'll go change. Mikoto and Sasuke glanced at each other and shrugged it off. Naruto still took some figuring out. Ka-san, what will you be doing during school today? Sasuke asked, which surprised Mikoto. Generally the girl had just accepted that Mikoto was quite busy with meetings and such. I have another meeting with the elders to review your engagement with Naruto. Sasuke's eyes widened and she blushed from the reminder, uncharacteristic of her usual stoic behavior. I might also get some information about which squad you're in and who your sensei will be. She hoped to arouse her daughter's interests but received nothing but a glance. She is still trying to keep her thoughts off the subject. She is nervous they won't be on a team together because of their place in the class. Naruto was ranked second to Sasuke amongst the other class of around 20 other academy students, making it seem as if the two would be spread amongst two teams to keep the skill level high. However, Mikoto had a good feeling that the two would be together for numerous reasons, one amongst them mother instinct. And the elders would jump at the chance to have them be close at all times at the very least if the two end up having a child earlier than scheduled. Not that Mikoto thought that either would do so, but they would enjoy each other's company in comparison to the rest of the class. Alright, Naruto yelled in a rambunctious voice as he opened the door with a new black Uchiha collar shirt and a big smile. You ready to go, Suki-chan? A bowl of half-eaten rice was his answer as the annoyed girl walked past him and toward the front door. What did I tell you about the name? It was his pet name for her, like Miko-chan, but Sasuke was embarrassed by it and tried to make him stop. Secretly he knew she loved it as he saw her blush many a time when they were alone, but he often did it just to tease her. He quickly began to pick up the rice so he could catch up, but a soft hand grabbed his, making him stop and look to see his smiling mother. Go on, Naruto, I don't want you late for school. My meeting doesn't start for a while anyway. Naruto looked unsure, but with an embarrassing peck on his cheek the blonde ran out of the house to catch up with his annoyed sister. Mikoto laughed as she picked up the food. He was too easy to tease. 000. Konohagakure Ninja Academy. The two Uchiha made it on time, surprising with how much time they wasted at home. As they entered the schoolyard, a combination of Sasuke's presence and the Uchiha crest brought eyes toward them. The rumor mill began to spin as it did every day as Naruto and Sasuke walked closely with one another, practically holding hands. It wasn't that there was some rules they couldn't reveal their relationship to the other kids or anything, they were just still embarrassed. The explaining that both didn't want to do along with obvious comments made about them afterward were most easily kept at bay by keeping a certain distance from one another until they were ready. Nonetheless, it didn't stop the word from spreading. Uchiha Sasuke and Naruto. They awfully look close for brother and sister. Why didn't they tell anyone they were related? I had to find out from my two-san. Almost looks like they're going out, she is way too good for him. I wish I was Naruto, he doesn't deserve that. Sasuke is so amazing, too bad her image is wrecked when the blonde stays so close by. Naruto's Uchiha name didn't stop people from despising him, it just gave them more varied reasons. Whether it be from jealousy, hatred of the nine tails, or even envy of skills or stature, Naruto was still a target. He didn't mind it so much as he grew up with it half of his life. Sasuke on the other hand still got annoyed. You shouldn't have to take that, Naruto. She mumbled, wondering if he could even hear her as they entered the classroom away from most of the kids. It's okay, Sasuke. Naruto wrapped an arm around her shoulders and brought her in for a hug, making her blush as a few other seated kids saw. As long as I have you and Ka-san, I don't care what they say. Sasuke didn't push him away like she used to, instead she liked this warm feeling inside her when they were close. Naruto was waiting for her to get angry and push him away, but instead she leaned in closer and gave a happy sigh as she closed her eyes dreamily. I guess so. Baka. Naruto blushed as they parted a bit to sit down in their chairs, next to one another in the far-off left corner of the class, mostly just to discourage kids from coming close to them. Sasuke got out of her daze as Naruto's arm left her to sit down, and she quickly assumed her usual position, eyes front and hands interlaced, giving her a bored look. This suited her because it kept boys away and let the teacher know she was still paying attention, even when she wasn't. All right, class, get seated. Iruka and Mizuki entered, both with clipboards that would no doubt be used for their final test grading. The kids scrambled to find their seats. A few boys glanced over at the Uchiha to see Naruto's impenetrable defense of Sasuke still remained. She sat on the far chair with the wall right next to her, and he took the middle, preventing anyone else from sitting by her. The worst part was she never gave any thought or sympathy to them when they wanted to sit by her, instead allowing her brother to do as he pleased. A few girls did in fact like Naruto, but were too scared Sasuke would do something or too nervous to do anything about it. They also figured out along with the boys that whether they were siblings or not, the two did not seem interested in anything else other than each other whenever they were seen. Iruka surveyed the class to ensure they were all quiet and listening, landing on the Uchiha pair with a small smirk. The two were sure to ace the test with their grades, and it would be his honor to pass them after the hard work they put in, no matter how much they acted like it was just simple chores. I don't know what kind of training Mikoto Uchiha-sama does to them to make them so at ease with our training regimen, but it definitely shows. They have no one even close to their scores in academics or ninja training. In all honesty, they could have graduated early, but the Hokage requested they stay in for the full run along with permission from Mikoto. Whatever reason they wanted them to stay with the class was beyond Iruka, but there were admittedly few who could be a match for them as a teammate. Today we will finish the three-part graduation exam as we finished taking the written exam on Monday, the ninja tool exercise yesterday, and now for your jutsu test today. Those who pass with overall acceptable scores and perform to at least a 70% in each category will be allowed to move on and graduate from the academy. The usual excited murmurs came up, and Iruka waved them off as he indicated a door near the chalkboard. The test will take place in there where Mizuki and I will test you on the Bunshin Jutsu. Mizuki just finished writing the order of students to come up on the chalkboard as the two prepared to depart. Please follow the order Mizuki-sensei has written on the board. First student Shino Aburame, please come with us to the testing area. Shino felt eyes on him as he slowly got up and followed the teachers into the room, leaving the rest to their thoughts. The usual glances made no surprise to the Uchiha as they waited patiently. Naruto emulated Sasuke's serious pose in an attempt to annoy her, and he realized it was working as she sent him a glare. Idiot. You know why I try and look serious all the time? Naruto smiled and brought his arm around her again to tease her, making all eyes tune to the area immediately. Of course, Sasuke-chan, but I don't like you being serious all the time. I like seeing you smile too. She blushed and allowed him to pull her closer for a hug. The moment ended when they both felt they weren't alone. Naruto looked behind him to see a boy from their class, Hibachi, standing in the aisle with crossed arms and an annoyed but cozy look on his face. The only way they remembered who he was because of two things: his bandana and the fact that he didn't like Naruto because he was always with Sasuke. To her, he was nothing. To him, it was his ticket to popularity to date her and become the next boy Uchiha. Naruto was always in his way though, and when he saw her smile when he put his arm around her, Hibachi decided now was the time to make a move while the teachers were out. Hey you, back off her, he said with a tough guy voice, but failed when Naruto and Sasuke heard him squeak as the Uchiha turned to glare at him. She's my family, you don't have a say in what we do. Sasuke liked the way Naruto spoke with an edge to his voice, especially since he was defending her. Why yeah, well, she didn't look too happy about it. Hibachi defended with a stutter, feeling the class begin to snicker behind his back. What do you want? Sasuke asked with an attitude. He was annoying her when she was about to get closer to Naruto during class. Sasuke-san, I think that since we're both gonna be genin soon and that means we both will be strong, it's time I ask you out on a date. Drop this loser of a brother. Naruto's glare intensified as he paused before continuing in a mumble. And go out with me. Sasuke wanted to roll her eyes. If the guy thought she would pity him, he was very wrong. Whether he knew it or not, Sasuke was taken and she didn't even know the kid to begin with, so she decided to let Naruto handle it. Naru-kun, get rid of him for me. Naruto smirked, never taking his eyes off of Hibachi as he stood up and cracked his knuckles. You got it, Suki-chan. Any requests? The class fell deathly silent as Hibachi began to shake in fear. They were being serious, weren't they? He got rejected and he was going to get beat up in the same day. Not if he had anything to say about it. I'm not afraid of you. He took a basic stance of defense as Sasuke's deadly smirk unnerved him as she gave Naruto one rule. No blood on me. Naruto took a step forward, making the boy flinch. He took a long stride, so he was now crouching low under Hibachi's body and sent a single uppercut right into his jaw. The boy felt pain as he momentarily was lifted off the ground and then sent flying across a desk when Naruto kicked him in the stomach. He landed on the other side of the room and, trying his best to nurse his pride, dragged himself back to his seat as Naruto returned to his spot with Sasuke. Nice, Naruto. But the kick was a little too much for him, I think. Naruto scratched the back of his head, displaying a carefree smile, weirding some out after he showed such an evil smirk before. Sorry, guess I forgot my own strength. Sasuke just shook her head in disbelief and returned to her world of boredom until they were called in. It was obvious of their outcome though to everyone in the school. The Uchiha had passed their final test. 000. Kanahagakure. Hokage's mansion. Office. And so you still remember the terms to our agreement, Uchiha Dono. The elders and Hokage were once again with Mikoto in a meeting, basically to review on their past agreements. Yes, elders. She sighed in exasperation, the amount of times they asked that over the past few years and they still thought she would conveniently forget. I know the terms of the CRA. Sasuke must have a child by 16 and myself by Naruto's age of 18. The elders nodded and was glad she remembered. A shame that boy did not take to the transplant. The Sharingan could have strengthened him further. Mikoto was actually somewhat happy compared to their disappointment. It meant Naruto would still be normal. A set of Sharingan eyes were not exactly subtle, especially to his classmates. If the transplant had worked, she would have definitely encouraged Naruto to hide them to keep his strength secret. But thoughts of it didn't matter much as they were past that opportunity. Moving on. I'm sure Mikoto Dono would appreciate a break from the usual questioning you two give her. The Hokage stepped in after the silence, ignoring the glares sent by his teammates. It came to my attention that you wanted to see the finalized list of teams, is that correct? Mikoto nodded. She was quite anxious to see exactly who her children ended up with, although she was surely not going to be surprised after the amount of recommendations she gave the Hokage. Truthfully, there was only one Jonin who had the qualifications to push them to their limits and further train Sasuke's dojutsu. Hatake Kakashi. As you requested and I supported, Jonin Hatake Kakashi has been appointed to lead Team 7. The squad consists of Sasuke, Naruto, and Shino Aburame. Mikoto thought over the Aburame boy. She didn't suggest him, but it wasn't a bad choice. Her children excelled in ninjutsu and taijutsu. Combine the offensive power with the Aburame's brains and hidden clan jutsu and they would make a deadly combination. A hybrid of tracking and offense, a kill team is what she likened it to. The Aburame. Odd choice, Hiruzen. Koharu muttered as she tried to figure out the Hokage's choice in the third member. Hiruzen merely shrugged and gave a who-knows smile. They could get along very well together as I see particular links in their personalities, as well as having a good combination of skills that will make them a lethal force as they grow. Under Kakashi's tutelage, I have no doubt they will be the strongest if not most successful team Konoha produces for many years to come. Mikoto was glad to hear his praise of her children, sensing no deception in his words as she often found with the empty compliments of the elders. She almost preferred Danzo. At least he told her straight up they hated each other. Better than doing it behind her back. 000. Kanahagakure. Streets. Sunset. Naruto had taken Sasuke on their first official date to celebrate graduation. In reality, it was just a fun little lunch they had together after they got out of school. The two really felt their awkwardness disappear as they just spent time together eating out at the small restaurant together without parental supervision and the feeling of being suddenly a lot older than they really were. The reactions from the populace who saw them together was relatively positive. Many of the younger townsfolk saw them as a cute couple and younger boys and girls swooned in jealousy of their pair. Even then, some ninja and older civilians who remembered the attack clearly still saw Naruto as the Nine Tails and refused to acknowledge the heiress would choose such a thing to be with. Naruto was walking along with Sasuke, who had her hands hidden in her pockets and her hair swaying behind her as they made their way home. Naruto was just looking up at the sky with an odd, thoughtful face as they walked along, and Sasuke was somewhat annoyed that he was paying more attention to the sky than her. They had just gotten off their first date as much as he didn't consider it one, and now he wouldn't even hold her hand home. She took a daring glance at his as it hung limply at his sides, swaying back and forth a bit with each step. A blush crept over her face as she took her right hand out of her pocket and made for a grab. I don't really know why. But I just don't care what people say when they see us holding hands. I just want him to hold me a little closer. Just before she could grab his hand and take it in hers, he stopped walking, making her just brush against it. Naruto looked into the sky again as he didn't even notice Sasuke's actions. His instincts had been right, there was something very wrong. Bathed in a sheen of orange and with a bit of glare, Mizuki was very difficult for Naruto to see off in the distance, but the boy could see the large scroll on his back. It seemed like their teacher was making a late withdrawal from the Hokage mansion and no one was trying to stop him. Naruto. What's the matter? Sasuke was getting a bit worried as well as annoyed. He rarely acted like this and it was scaring her. Naruto looked at her for what felt like the first time since they left their date spot, and she could easily tell his fake smile from his real one. Naruto didn't want to freak her out and decided he would investigate alone. It was probably nothing anyway. It's nothing, I just remembered something I had to get. Go on ahead and welcome Ka-san. Tell her I'll give her a back rub when I get back. Sasuke was confused and angry as he jumped away into the lowering sun as night began to fall. Why did Naruto show her his fake smile? He hasn't done that since we were little. He would give that smile when they would walk the streets and people would glare at him. She would ask and he would just smile and shrug it off. With age, Sasuke could tell hate from the look, but Naruto still would not admit to anything. Mikoto acted as if there was nothing to talk about, but she sensed the two knew more than they let on. I'm not letting you do whatever you're doing alone, Naruto. Sasuke jumped off after him, hoping she could catch up in time. 000. Kanahagakure outskirts. Abandoned shed. Mizuki landed with ease at his hideout and with an unbridled smirk unstrapped the large scroll on his back. His plunder was too easy to get as the guards had become lax at the end of the day, allowing him to sneak into the archives without much fuss. He wondered if he could risk a peek to learn a technique or two for himself, of course to strengthen his bond with his soon-to-be leader, Orochimaru. This was his key for power, but both opportunities offered something great of value. His thoughts of grandeur were cut off when he sensed a new presence and turned to see the Uchiha. It seemed as if the kid was really following him after all. He had hoped it was just nerves, but the blonde was as good as they say and the kid deserved praise. That was if Mizuki really cared about being his teacher, which he obviously didn't. With the Nine Tails in his grasp, he could kill or capture him to further Orochimaru's power. Everything seemed to be going his way today. Mizuki's sickening smirk seemed to confirm what Naruto feared, as it seemed the teacher had cracked, either becoming a traitor or going insane for power. Either way, there was no way he was supposed to have the scroll of sealing, and it was Naruto's duty as a genin of Konoha to stop him. That was what he had earned the headband for that now was worn proudly on his forehead. Ah. So the Kyuubi brat decides to be the village hero and show up. Naruto stiffened. That was the first time anyone had directly referred to him in relation with Kyuubi. Even though he knew the beast was inside him, it didn't make things any easier on him to hear that. Unfortunately, Mizuki noticed the change in stance and decided to press the wound. Oh, surprised I know that, Naruto. Everyone knows. Your friends, your teachers, the ninja who pretend to protect you, even the Hokage. And they all hate you for it. His venom seeped into Naruto's veins and he felt on fire with anger and fear. Was that really why he felt so separated? Could people hate him so much that they would exile him to a life of solitude even as a child? The answer became all too clear to him as Naruto brought a hand to his face, now embattled with his own inner conflict. Mizuki stalked forward as he was ready to point the dagger at the boy's heart, the Uchiha. Did you think Mikoto-san didn't know? Of course she knew. The Uchiha died to Kyuubi just as well as any other ninja and they hated you for it too, even now she took you in because she pitied you. Maybe she planned to kill you but developed some sick sense of humor in keeping you as her pet. Naruto sunk to his knees, this was too much for him to think about. Stop it. Stop it please. Mizuki undid the strap on his large shuriken attached to his back and began to work it into a spin as he still approached with that sickening smirk. And don't even get me started on your precious sister Sasuke. She'll throw you away faster than I can throw th. Stop it. Or what Kyuubi boy, let's see you stop this. Mizuki let loose the shuriken, tired of his game as he realized the boy was already broken, he sobbed on the ground and did not make to avoid the shuriken. Naruto, snap out of it. He looked up to see Sasuke holding the shuriken in place, one hand in the center wheel while the other rested comfortably on one of the blades. His sister had stopped the killing blow to the Kyuubi boy, why did she? Naruto then saw her stiffen up a bit and grunt in pain, both hands were laced with blood as it trickled down her fingers to the ground. She had caught the shuriken initially with her hands on the blades due to a bad angle in her positioning but it was the only way she could see in saving Naruto. She had heard all of what Mizuki said, even the part describing Naruto as Kyuubi. There were a few things she didn't understand still, like how Naruto had Kyuubi inside him and what that meant for him, but she did know that what he was saying about her and Mikoto wasn't true. They loved Naruto no matter who or what he was, they were family and that was tighter than any other bond. Sasuke. Why? She heard him croak out the question in mid-sob. I'm the keeper of a monster. I don't deserve this. Sasuke frowned, he was so vulnerable right now after Mizuki's barrage, she would think it cute if the situation was different. Naruto. He looked at her and saw her flashing him a confident smile, very rare of Sasuke to do. The last time she did that was when Naruto mastered the fireball technique at the pier, that was the day he had become a true Uchiha. Mikoto and Sasuke were so proud and he had never felt closer to them afterward. Now it seemed that smile was his salvation in the face of defeat. That's what brothers and sisters are supposed to do, because we're family. Naruto couldn't believe she said that, it reminded him of the past times she had said the same thing. Mizuki just stood there, annoyed at how she brought him back from the brink with just a few words. Besides, she turned back to glare at Mizuki, signaling their fight was back on. If my baka of a fiancé goes and gets himself killed, who will I marry then? Damn brat, is that all you can do is talk? Sasuke smirked and readied the shuriken to throw back at him with just as much ferocity as when it was first used. You should know sensei, you tested me after all. 000. Well, that chapter is done and I left off with a, I'm sure to be Killer Cliffy. Sorry but it just felt right to leave off there and besides I've got things to do and people to see. Abandoned shed. Mizuki glared at Sasuke, who was she to speak so high and mighty to him? An instructor at Konoha Academy, a Chunin ninja and one of Orochimaru's future chosen. It was blasphemy. He would teach her a lesson for getting in his way with the demon brat. The fight would have to be quick though, no doubt the village was on alert by now with the stolen scroll. Sasuke stood in front of the prone Naruto in a defensive position in case the man tried to get at him again. She didn't know what his angle was attacking Naruto's emotions like that, but he would pay for it. There was no way this man, not even a Chunin of the Leaf, could beat an Uchiha prodigy like her, or Naruto for that matter. It would be over quick and the two could go back to the village as heroes. Naruto didn't know what to do. He willed his body to move, to stand with Sasuke, but it wouldn't. Damn these feelings. I can't move. I'm leaving right now, this is your chance to step back and forget you saw me. Take it. Or don't. Mizuki threatened, hoping to scare them. It only served to anger Sasuke further. How dare you say that after what you did to Naruto? I won't let you get away for that. Sasuke exclaimed, getting into a battle-ready stance. Mizuki gritted his teeth, it seemed as though he wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. He readied another giant shuriken and gripped it tightly in his left hand. He made a sudden dash forward toward the two Uchiha and made the shuriken spin into a mighty whirlwind, increasing its piercing strength. Sasuke brought her own shuriken up to defend against his diagonal slash but was shocked to see the weapon break under pressure. She rolled out of the way but was quickly forced back on the defensive as Mizuki threw the large shuriken at her, forcing her to jump backward toward the shed. Mizuki knew that would be too easy for the girl to dodge, so he grabbed a few more small shuriken from his pack and launched them at the spot where the girl would land. That should be enough to keep her occupied. A sudden new presence forced him to look toward the trees as he noticed the green of a Konoha flak vest and knew that he had been caught. Damn. Mizuki leapt backward and threw a kunai at Naruto. It wasn't clear whether he wanted to wound Naruto, or to keep the new arrival distracted. Naruto watched as if in slow motion as the kunai flew toward him. A piece of paper whistled in the wind as it was strung to the kunai. An explosive tag, he thought absently, not realizing just how dangerous the weapon was. His eyes widened as it got closer and a bright white light blinded him and forced his eyes shut. A scream echoed through the trees as night fell on the forest. 000. Naruto quickly opened his eyes to see that he was indeed alive. The attack intended for him had missed its mark. The result was obvious though. A small crater was still smoldering a few feet away from him. Foreign hands were over his head and a larger body was covering his own in protection. Iruka checked Naruto with his own eyes to see that the boy was alright, if not a bit shell-shocked from the blast. At the last moment, Iruka had landed next to Naruto and deflected the weapon into an angled arc, making it hit the ground away from them as he pushed Naruto the ground. While there wasn't much time to pay attention, he did remember a scream as the blast went off and quickly checked his surroundings. What he saw made him gasp in terror. Sasuke was up against the shed's wall. A few shurikens surrounded her on the ground. Those were the ones she had time to deflect. The large shuriken had embedded itself in the wall, keeping one of her arms pinned between two of its blades but otherwise not harming her. Two more smaller shuriken had dug their teeth into her opposite shoulder and leg, immobilizing her. The scream was a combination of pain that she had not experienced before and seeing the hostile weapon get close to Naruto. As Sasuke looked at the scene in front of her now, a flood of relief washed over her seeing Naruto alive and well. Iruka quickly ran over to her and removed the large shuriken from the wall, sending splinters out toward the man and the ground. The next two were tricky as he did not want to harm the Uchiha and his student, but he knew that it wasn't good to leave them in or they would only further wound her with movement. Hang on Sasuke-san. I'm going to remove the shuriken. It will hurt. Sasuke just glared at him and he quickly began as Naruto picked himself up and ran over to join his teacher and sister. Groans ensued as the two bloody weapons were removed and thrown to the ground, leaving Sasuke bleeding and Naruto even worse off than before. It was his fault she had those wounds and a sense of guilt and anger festered inside of him. His body had been in shock and wouldn't move, but it was his fault he did not snap out of the fugue sooner to stop Mizuki that his sister-in-law was hurt. He couldn't take back what had happened, but he could get revenge. Right now. Mizuki got away. Sasuke grunted, looking in the direction he took off. Iruka looked at the girl, amazed she was still in the mood to fight with her challenging tone. With her wounds though, she would only hinder herself in battle and make them worse. Reinforcements could be alerted at the village once he took her to the hospital, but they wouldn't find him in time. It looked like he would have to send Naruto with Sasuke while he pursued his former friend, alone. Naru, Iruka was once again cut off as the boy looked at him with what he could only tell was a look of revenge. Sensei. Please take my sister to the hospital. I will pursue Mizuki and retrieve the scroll of sealing. Naruto looked at Sasuke and saw concern in her eyes even if she was the one wounded. But Naruto, you can't take him on alone. You aren't in the condition to. Naruto gave her a knowing look and she quieted down. Something in his eyes told her to calm down, to trust him, so she obeyed. It's my fault you got hurt, Sasuke. You had to protect me while I couldn't do anything to save you. Now I have to finish what I started, stop Mizuki. And make him pay for hurting you. Sasuke blushed as Iruka almost fell over at the sudden turn of events. What happened to a simple situation? Naruto, you don't have the skill level required to fight Mizuki. He's a chunin and you are just barely a genin graduate from the academy. I know him personally and all of his skills, plus my judgment isn't clouded with revenge. Naruto glared at his sensei. He was right, but that didn't stop him from knowing he had to take that guy down. I'm sorry, sensei, but I'm the one that caught up to Mizuki first. I started this, and I'm going to finish it too. We don't have time to argue and my sister needs treatment. I'll be back soon. Naruto leapt off into the trees with Iruka and Sasuke watching him leave, powerless to stop him. Hey Naru, the boy was already gone, so Iruka resorted to shouting his last order. Alright, but I'm on my way back as soon as I drop Sasuke off. He looked back at the girl and knelt down, offering his shoulder. Sasuke looped her unwounded arm over his back and felt him grab her around the waist to support her. Her brother was going off to get revenge and she was forced to head back to the village. Naruto might not be able to forgive himself for what happened to her, but it would be the same if he got hurt or killed going off because of Sasuke's wounds. With no way of being there with him physically, Sasuke settled for a prayer as they began their trek to the village. Stay safe, Naruto. 000. Konohagakure. Mikoto was still inside the compound, going over some papers when she felt someone coming. The pounding at the gate let her know the guest had arrived and she quickly went to see what they could want at such a late hour. Her children were still not home, but she wasn't too concerned as they were most likely with one another wherever they were. Arriving at the gate, Mikoto opened it to find a chunin heavily breathing from jumping around place to place. It was his job to get the word out about the missing scroll and recruit ninja to help search for it. He had no idea about the missing Uchiha children and what he was in store for in the Uchiha compound. All he knew was the Hokage's order and that the Uchiha were quite capable ninja, from the ones that were left that was. Yes, what is it? Mikoto didn't know the young man's name in particular but stayed polite. It had to be urgent if they were coming at this odd hour. A slight moment of fear crept over her thinking of the children, but she brushed it aside. Uchiha-san, the Hokage has put out a general alert within the village. The scroll of sealing has been stolen and we need help tracking down the one who took it. The guards along the wall have not said of anyone trying to escape, so we figure he's still within the village somewhere. Would you please help us search? Mikoto was shocked such an important artifact could be stolen right from under the Hokage, but knew the gravity of the situation. If those jutsu got out, it would make the world a lot more dangerous than it already was. Yes, I will begin searching as soon as I get in proper dress. Please excuse me. The chunin nodded and jumped off into the night to alert others while Mikoto headed back to her home to change. Her usual attire was of her apron with a shirt and pants underneath, nothing special. It had been a while since Mikoto had worn her ninja gear, but this situation she felt required it. Besides, she was a junin of the village and should every once in a while remind herself and everyone else of the fact. Within her bedroom was where she kept her old ninja gear, where she had left it the day she retired to take care of Sasuke. Mikoto undressed herself down to her black panties and quickly grabbed her black tank top, a tight sleeveless with the Uchiha fan on the back. Next she put on the standard Junin flak vest. It completely covered the top underneath but let her cleavage breathe as she unzipped it a bit. Her pants were a standard affair, dark blue with a pair of sandals to complete the outfit. Any ninja tool she needed was already packed in her hip pouch and Mikoto was ready to go. She left the gate closed behind her as she began to jump across the village, searching for anything suspicious. In the back of her mind she was also keeping her eye out for Sasuke and Naruto. Those two weren't as disciplined as the older ninja, but they could still help search. Without much to go on their suspect though, Mikoto had no idea where to look or who she was looking for. Well, if I had to guess, they probably aren't in town anymore. The other Junin would have searched there already and it would be too obvious. The scroll must be in the forest somewhere. Mikoto stopped on a rooftop to take in her surroundings before she would move on. Around her, blurs in the night could be seen as shinobi desperately searched for the thief. Even in the darkness of Konoha, Mikoto could make out the lavender eyes of Hyuga search parties using their infamous Byakugan Kekkei Genkai. With them on the search it surely wouldn't take much longer, and once she saw the Inoshika Cho senior group running through the village she realized how serious the situation was to everyone. No sense standing around. Mikoto leapt off again in search of the culprit but felt a certain amount of hopelessness in her search. What made her have any better chance of finding him than a hyuga? A blast of wind made her hair whip back as an Anbu squad landed on the rooftop she was on. They ran past her to their next destination, not paying her too much mind. The squad leader just gave the clan head a courteous nod before she leapt off after her squad. "Sorry Uchiha-sama," were her parting words in startling Mikoto when they arrived. She cursed herself, getting jumpy over something so simple. Mikoto moved again, this time closer to the center of the city where the Hokage mansion was. Maybe the culprit had come back to survey their crime. That was what Fugaku had told her was one of the most common mistakes a criminal made. Instead of seeing a criminal though, she saw what she never wanted to see. Sasuke was on the back of a chunin, she knew him as Iruka. He was their homeroom teacher and had just recently approved their graduation to genin. While this fact alone worried her, even from their distance of a dozen buildings or so she could make out some cuts or wounds on her daughter. This made her act on reflex and move to check on her herself as the mother. Sasuke. Iruka touched down and saw an incoming figure. To his surprise it was the girl's mother and head of the Uchiha clan. And she looked like she was about to kill something. Sasuke looked up from Iruka's shoulder to see who called her name. Instantaneously she was surprised to see her mother coming toward her. Iruka let her down and allowed the wounded girl to go to her mother's arms where she belonged. The chunin smiled for a moment as the two met and embraced. That was one good ending to the night. "Oh Sasuke. I thought the worst when I saw you on Iruka's back." Mikoto rubbed her daughter's back and desperately held on, afraid she would lose her if she let go. Sasuke was glad her mother was concerned, but she was losing feeling in her body from her mother squeezing along with pain from the wounds. "Mother. If you keep squeezing me it might make these worse." Mikoto realized she was speaking of her wounds and immediately backed off with a layer of concern touching her. Her eyes widened at the latest realization. "Where is Naruto? Where is my son? Where is Naruto?" Sasuke looked depressed for a moment and hesitated in answering, making Mikoto's fears go wild in her mind. Iruka was quick to jump in. He pursued Mizuki, "Mikoto-sama. He is the thief of the scroll of sealing and the one who did this to your daughter. I wasn't able to stop him, so I decided to bring Sasuke back to the hospital and go after him once I was done." Mikoto took a deep breath and processed the information. It was better than what she had first thought. "Iruka, please go and bring Naruto to me. I know my children are ninja now. But we both know that there are opponents that they just can't handle. I almost lost Sasuke and I don't want to lose Naruto over a scroll." Iruka nodded and took one last concerned look at Sasuke. The girl seemed to have trouble with her wounds still untreated. Mikoto read his thoughts and allayed them. "Don't worry, I will be taking my daughter to the hospital right after this. You can bring Naruto there when you get him. And then I will have a stern talk for both of you." She left the sentence on a hard note as she looked at Sasuke, who could only look to the ground in embarrassment. Iruka sent a sympathetic smile her way before leaping off the building toward the forest to find Naruto. It hadn't been too long since they had separated, so Iruka was hopeful that he could find them both in time. If he didn't, well, he didn't want to know how Mikoto would react to such news. Naruto may not have been seen as an Uchiha by most of the populace, but Mikoto acted like he was her flesh and blood. Mikoto watched him leave before getting her daughter situated on her back, as it seemed her leg wasn't good enough to jump on anymore. "Hang on Sasuke, we're going." The woman felt her daughter nod into her back as her arms looped around her neck. Mikoto began to make her way to the hospital, albeit at a slower pace now. There were many questions she wanted to ask but knew better than to make her daughter feel even worse. "What were you two doing before you decided to chase after Mizuki?" she suddenly asked, not so sure she herself knew why. Sasuke thought back to earlier that day, after they had chosen their headbands and been told they had passed their exam. "Naruto chose black and I chose blue. Everyone looked so jealous of how good we looked together. We went on a date. To celebrate graduating." She added the last part as an afterthought to comfort her mother because she jumped at the word of date. Mikoto was surprised they were moving that fast in their relationship. She still thought of them as children playing at the thought of being together. Then again, Mikoto had no real grasp on real relationships. She and Fugaku had been promised to each other at a later age and were producing heirs when they should have been dating and having fun. Either way, she was happy that they were getting along so well. I see. How was he? Sasuke recognized the tenderness in her mother's voice, something she only heard when she was interested or approved of something with a smile. That was when she knew her mother was smiling, and she began to smile too. He was wonderful, Ka-san. Everything I wanted him to be when I dreamed about the future when we were young, but I was kind of disappointed at the end of it. Mikoto felt her daughter frown and wondered what happened. What? Did he do something wrong? Sasuke just shook her head. I wanted to hold hands, but then he saw Mizuki and started this whole mess. I guess I was being selfish to want to hold his hand in front of everybody. Mikoto actually felt like laughing but kept it in. Oh, don't worry, Suki-chan. There will be plenty of chances in the future to hold his hand, especially in front of everyone in Konoha. Her daughter calmed at that, and it wasn't long before they arrived at the hospital. The doctors and nurses were taken a bit by surprise but quickly set the Uchiha up with their own medical suite and began to heal Sasuke immediately. While her injuries were somewhat serious, they were nowhere near life-threatening, and it wasn't long before the girl was better than before. Mikoto insisted she rest a while since they had to wait for Naruto arrive anyway. Mikoto stared out the window of their room, tapping lightly on the wall as she waited for any sign of their arrival. Her tapping steadily increased as her stress grew. This was no laughing matter to her. Naruto was as loved in the Uchiha household as any pureblood, son or daughter, tailed beast or no. To have him out of her sight, in danger, was a difficult feeling to grasp. She knew she would have to get used to the fact he was a ninja now. Missions to far-off nations and even wars to fight in were not outside of his grasp anymore, and they were something he would have to face alone. No, she corrected herself with a glance to Sasuke. They will face them together. A light knock on the door made both Uchiha turn to see the Hokage enter with a few Anbu. Mikoto tensed on reflex but relaxed as the old man smiled and walked up to her, grasping her shoulder in comfort as the Anbu took up defensive positions at the door. I heard what happened from a messenger Iruka ran into on his way to Naruto. I thought it best to wait here for his victorious return so I could congratulate and reward him for his job well done. Mikoto smiled at his thoughtfulness but then had a quizzical look. Reward him? Hiruzen turned to see Sasuke weakly stare at him, trying her best to stay awake for when Naruto would return. He walked over and gently took her hand in his, giving her a slight grip to keep her awake. Thank you for what you did as well, Sasuke-chan. If it wasn't for you, Naruto would never have gotten over his insecurities of being a Jinchuriki, nor would he have become a strong ninja like his parents. You are in my debt for taking care of him. As are you, Mikoto. He looked back at the mother and saw her confused look, which he sought to fix. You see, Mikoto. There are a few things about Naruto and his past that you should know, or if you haven't already guessed them, allow me to confirm them. To start with, and then Hiruzen enlightened the two Uchiha on Naruto's real past, just who was behind the making of what could be someday the strongest ninja in Konoha. At the end of it, their eyes felt more open than before and their respect and love for Naruto only grew. Hiruzen told them of how he would handle telling Naruto of his heritage, letting him know a piece now and then the whole story upon his promotion to Chunin. When they were all in agreement over what would be said, there was only one thing left to do: wait. 000. Konohagakure Forest. It didn't take long for Naruto to catch the rat, and Mizuki knew that the confrontation would be unavoidable at this point. His only hope was that it wouldn't delay him too much from his goal of escaping with the scroll to give to his master, Orochimaru. The man wasn't known for patience, and he was already behind schedule as it was. A squad of sound ninja were waiting outside to escort him safely, but if he delayed too long they would leave without him. That was something he could not allow, especially if it was caused by the demon brat. Naruto knew the man wouldn't stop willingly, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. He grabbed a few shuriken and threw them right at the man, forcing him to adopt an erratic pattern of jumping to avoid being hit. This caused him to slow down considerably and let the blonde catch up where he was finally in range for jutsu. Mizuki sensed the boy's presence and turned around only to have a wire wrap around his wrist and hold him in place. He looked up to see Naruto on a higher tree branch, the wire in his mouth as he went through a few hand signs. This made the Chunin fearful of the wire and quickly grabbed a kunai to slice through it. It was to his horror that he realized the wire was tougher than he thought and the kunai did nothing but tighten its grip. Time to show you what I learned from Ka-san's jutsu library. Fire shot from Naruto's mouth down the wire and engulfed Mizuki's clothed arm and set him on fire. This made him panic less from pain and more from the shock value of being on fire. Naruto let the wire go and followed him to the ground as he desperately swatted his arm against the dirt to get rid of the fire, in the process dropping the scroll of sealing. Naruto saw it and wondered whether it would be better to grab it and run or take care of Mizuki. Thoughts of what the man had done to Sasuke ran through his mind and that settled it, he would take care of the traitor for sure. Mizuki had planned for a counterattack though, and as soon as his arm had been saved began weaving hand signs. Naruto saw the danger and leapt back up onto the tree branch, recognizing the serpent sign used in earth jutsu. Doden. Ritsudo Tensho. Mizuki slammed his fist into the ground and Naruto felt the ground shake around him and realized his perch wasn't as safe as he thought it was. Without much further delay, the ground collapsed in on itself and threatened to take the tree, and Naruto with it. The boy leapt off of it and hit the ground in a tough barrel roll to soak up the energy of the landing. He didn't get much time to recover though as Mizuki came up and kicked him right in the gut as he tried to stand, sending him back and forcing him into a tree. Let's see your girlfriend save you this time, Nine Tails. Mizuki grabbed a kunai and dashed forward, knowing that the boy got the wind knocked out of him and wouldn't be able to move. Naruto watched as Mizuki charged him, cursing himself for lowering his defense. He began to move agonizingly slow, attempting to reach for his own kunai. It was do or die and he knew it. Their kunai would meet and one of them would die. It was the only way the battle could come to an end. As the battle came to its climax, the other entity within Naruto felt it was time the ruse came off. For its own self-preservation, Kyuubi made the decision to free Naruto from his shackles for once. Alright boy, send some chakra to your eyes. It's time you use the Sharingan, or else you won't be able to react to his attack in time. Naruto pushed the surprise aside from Kyuubi speaking with him outside of the mindscape and did as he was told, allowing his undeveloped Sharingan to show. While he wasn't adept at using it, this being his first time, he could easily take advantage of its effects. Mizuki and the world slowed down around him as he predicted the man's movements and allowed himself to match them. This new power, along with inspiring thoughts of his family in Konoha, gave Naruto the strength to reach for his kunai and meet Mizuki in mid-dash. It had all happened so fast for the Chunin, he did not even have time to react when Naruto's kunai plunged deep into his stomach. Surprise was the first emotion. How did this boy have the skill to meet his own and exceed it? Then realization dawned on him, somehow he had gotten the Sharingan from his new family and he had used it on him. He felt cheated out of victory. He was so close to power he could taste it. Mizuki slumped forward, his hand landing on Naruto's shoulder as he held the pose of stabbing Mizuki. A grin spread on the older man's mouth as his life force drained out on the earth below and he whispered a few choice words to Naruto as his last revenge. Remember this boy. Remember me as your first kill. The first blood on your hands. Remember why you are a monster. He coughed up blood and slightly gurgled his last few words, making them unintelligible to Naruto as he fell back and hit the ground. It took Naruto a moment to recover as he looked at the bloody kunai and dropped it, not wanting to soil his hands any further. With his last words, Naruto did not want to look at Mizuki's dead body as he knew it would only haunt him the rest of his days. Instead he grabbed the scroll and prepared to take off with it back to the village, but then that presence in his head spoke again, this time in a condescending tone. What do you think you are doing, boy? Now is our chance. We have the village's most sacred jutsu right there in that scroll, and with your Sharingan, you can read and memorize it all to be written down later. It's a perfect opportunity. Kyuubi was ecstatic. It seemed like Konoha had slipped up and they could reap the benefits. But isn't that wrong? They are sealed up for a reason. To copy them would be wrong to do. Naruto's conscience got the better of him as he argued with Kyuubi, who knew exactly how to handle the boy. Think about it, Naruto. What has the village itself ever done for you? They beat you, spit on you, ignored your very existence whenever possible. The only people who care for you are the two in that compound, and they are not well liked either. With these jutsu, you can better protect them from evils outside of the village, and within its own walls. Don't you want that, Naruto? Kyuubi almost felt like cackling as the boy's mental barriers fell. I guess you're right. What has this village done for me? I can think of this as a payment for my good deed here. Naruto sat down and began to read the scroll with his Sharingan activated. This time no pain came as he kept it on for almost half an hour. Yes. That's right. Just a payment for what you've done. Kyuubi eyed the scroll as Naruto read through it, a devilish smirk forming on his face. By the time Iruka arrived to collect Naruto and Mizuki, the boy had everything memorized and ready to go. 000. When Naruto stepped into the hospital room by midnight, Sasuke had long fallen asleep. It was her hope to stay awake long enough to see him okay, but with gentle urgings from her mother she relented and let sleep fall upon her. While the Anbu were the first to notice his arrival, Mikoto was the first to react as she charged him and hugged him tight to her bras. Oh Naruto, I'm so glad to see you're alright. Naruto could barely breathe but bore with it so his Ka-san could be happy. A few more hugs and kisses later and he was set free, allowing him to be welcomed by the Hokage next. The old man gave him a proud smile as the scroll was handed to him and news of Mizuki's death was told. It was a nasty business, dealing with a traitor to the village. Capture was preferred of course, but rarely did they ever allow themselves to be caught. It was even worse, someone so young as Naruto was forced to kill, but it might have turned out to be a better experience for him in the long run. Thank you for returning this cumbersome troublemaker to me Naruto, I apologize the trouble it's given you and Sasuke. Hiruzen honestly admitted, giving a slight bow to the Uchiha. Naruto just nodded, still in a bit of shock over his first kill and not wanting to revisit the thought. Instead he allowed himself to think of Sasuke and went to her bedside, looking her over to make sure she was alright. All her wounds had been healed and she looked perfect, almost like an angel sleeping like that. Naruto brushed back a bang so he could look at her face as she slept, her snow-white skin almost glistened in its untouched purity. This was how he wanted Sasuke to remain, safe and untouched, as beautiful as the day they met back in the academy. Mikoto just smiled as she watched from afar, letting things play out as they would. Hiruzen too noticed the affectionate and delicate touch Naruto gave the girl and smiled. It seemed as though their forced relationship turned out for the better after all. Now that Naruto was in a bit better of a mood, the Hokage felt like now was as good as any to let Naruto have his reward. Naruto, I would like to speak with you about something very important. The boy turned to see the Hokage with a few scrolls and reluctantly left the sleeping girl's side. I'm not sure how much you know about your heritage, as much of it was purposely kept from you. However, Hiruzen sent a glance to Mikoto before continuing. We believe it's time you hear a little about a very important person in your life and for you to have some things she left behind for you. Naruto's breathing heightened and he felt very anxious. Were they talking about who he thought they were? Naruto Uchiha, I would like to tell you a story of a most beautiful and youthful kunoichi. One that most definitely be considered a unique type of shinobi here within Konoha, one that we don't see often. Naruto, I'd like to tell you about Uzumaki Kushina, your mother. The hospital room went dead silent at that moment. The only sound that could be heard was the teardrops that fell upon the tiled floor and the comforting whispers of a mother to her son. 000. Well, what did you think? I'll be glad once we get through this early arc of the story and into the real meat, aka the Chunin exams and onwards. I hope you enjoyed and please leave a review as well as vote in the poll. The silence that followed the Hokage's story was deafening. Naruto felt as if a bomb had been dropped and he was in shell shock from the blast, deaf to the world with his thoughts racing. His mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was a ninja of the village and was one of the few remaining survivors of the Uzumaki clan following its destruction. To top it off, it seemed as though his adoptive mother Mikoto knew Kushina personally, but she had either been unable or unwilling to alert Naruto of the connection. Mikoto had done her best to comfort Naruto, but it seemed as if this was something he would have to sort out on his own. As his guardian and hopefully still his mother, she hoped that she could still help him through this difficult revelation. Just when he felt he had sunk into the Uchiha family, He had half of his heritage thrown at him. She would hate to ponder what would have happened should he have been told all of his history. The Hokage just looked at the boy as he stood there, processing the information in no doubt a scrambled, lost manner. Mikoto stood beside him, a comforting hand on his shoulder as she looked down at him in worry. The girl Uchiha still had not woken from her slumber and would most likely be out until morning. The Hokage also knew it was time that he leave, not only because his duty was done there but also because he still had to fill out paperwork on this dreadful situation with Mizuki. Well, Naruto-kun, that is but a taste of who Uzumaki Kushina truly was. A marvelous kunoichi by all accounts. I'm sure my tale does her little justice. I wish I could stay longer to answer any questions you have, but I think right now you just need some time to think and I must finish the paperwork of this mess and return the scroll of seals to its rightful place. If you will excuse me. Hiruzen began to make his way out but stopped before he passed Mikoto, turning to speak. And Mikoto, again pass my condolences to Sasuke-chan on the unfortunate events that happened this night and a hope for her speedy recovery. Good night. Mikoto nodded and watched as the Hokage, and his escort, left the room and allowed them all peace. Quote. The room was quiet other than Mikoto's attempt to speak only for her to fall short of words. This wasn't something she had time to prepare for. I'm going to go home now. Mikoto-san. There are a few things I have to think about, and I should go through these scrolls the Hokage gave me. Naruto shrugged off her hand and walked toward the door, leaving a shocked Mikoto behind. He's never used that name for me. Is he angry with me? A sinking feeling in her stomach convinced her it was true as she could have done better with the subject of Naruto's mother. Honestly, she was still in shock a bit and did not know how to speak to Naruto about the information. She was disappointed now, knowing she should have been more concerned with his feelings than her own. This event would be somewhat beneficial though. Not only would he be able to make use of his newfound Uzumaki knowledge early to develop his skills, he could also wean himself out of the idea she was his real mother. Having her as a strong pillar of support was one thing, but Naruto had almost seemed to consider himself Mikoto's blood child. While this was not a bad thing to her, she knew that it would have hurt how he would take learning of his mother later on, possibly even forsaking her completely in favor of Mikoto. It would break her to know she was the cause of her friend Kushina's child not taking on her name, so it was better this way. Still, it made her feel bad that Naruto was going through such a difficult experience like this, but she could do nothing until he himself figured out his feelings on the matter. He could take up his name as an Uzumaki and move out as soon as his age allowed, or he could remain an Uchiha and accept the fact he was an Uzumaki too. She had to admit she would rather him stay with her and Sasuke. They had grown so attached it would seem wrong for him to not be with them in the future. She sighed and took a chair next to Sasuke's bed, deciding it would be better to let Naruto have the compound to himself tonight. There was no doubt he had much to think about and Mikoto would be better off staying with her daughter at this time. Sasuke-chan. What will our Naruto do this time? Mikoto spoke to her daughter as she gently held her hand, preparing to endure the long night. Please don't do anything rash. I want you to stay the same way, Naru-kun. A knock signaled a new arrival and Mikoto immediately thought it odd someone would disturb them. Come in, she spoke, careful not to wake her daughter though. The door quietly squeaked open and then closed, revealing an embarrassed Kakashi with a small bouquet of flowers. Mikoto cocked her head in confusion, wondering what the Jonin was doing there. It's not like they were particularly friends or anything. In fact, many of the Uchiha wanted him dead for having the Sharingan. No attempt was ever made as far as she knew, but even she had heard Fugaku speak ill of him on occasion. To already show concern for his student though made Mikoto at least think well of him. Sorry Uchiha-san, but I heard what happened and felt I should come and see how my soon-to-be students were. I passed Naruto, but he didn't seem to notice me. In fact, he looked like he was in a daze. Kakashi looked into space for a moment as he thought about the moment they passed. The boy looked like something terrible had happened. Ah yes. Well, Naruto-kun is just in shock over his first kill, I believe. He said he wanted to go home and rest, so I decided to stay here with Sasuke. Kakashi nodded and saw the girl in the bed, sleeping peacefully. He walked over and handed the flowers to Mikoto, who placed them by the girl's bed on her nightstand. They seemed to be a random collection, no doubt what he could gather on a short notice. Still, the thought was what counted, as they say. Hee hee. He chuckled awkwardly, scratching his head as he saw her eye the flowers. It was short notice, as I'm sure you could tell. Mikoto smiled and pointed at a seat for him to take, and out he graciously made use of. No, I'm sure Sasuke-chan will appreciate it. Silence fell on them as they just sat there, thinking of what to say. Mikoto didn't really have anything to say to Kakashi and hoped he would leave soon. It wasn't that she necessarily disliked him, but the fact of the matter was the night was a very long and tiring one for her. There was too much to think about in such a short time, and his interruption only served to delay her from sorting out the racing thoughts in her mind. Kakashi-san. If there isn't anything else, I would appreciate it if you. He held up a hand that made her quiet down, hoping he got the message. I understand a lot has happened tonight, Mikoto-san, and I will get out of your way. But there is something else I came here to discuss with you. This made Mikoto realize the visit wasn't so last minute after all. It seemed Kakashi had planned on coming to see them anyway. What about? Kakashi sighed and leaned forward in the chair, clasping his hands together. It's about the training I'm going to put your kids through. I'm here to warn you beforehand so you don't hate me if I have to fail them. Mikoto's eyes widened. Fail Naruto and Sasuke? What do you mean? Kakashi just kept that straight face as he looked at her. It only served to test her nerves. I'm sure you've looked over my file, Mikoto-san. I have failed every group of genin sent my way because they did not accomplish my goal I set for them. With 2 Uchiha prodigies and a Aburame loner on a team, I fear this group is even worse off than the rest. Mikoto got a hard look in her eye and stood up as Kakashi's eyes followed her. May we continue this? Outside. He nodded after a moment and followed her out, having expected this response among others. Now then. How dare you presume my children are failures before they even begin their training? If you only came here to test my patience, you have done a good job. Mikoto spat in an angry but hushed tone to the man who just took it in stride. I appreciate your concern for your children, but if they can't learn what I will try and teach them, then I have no choice but to fail them. They won't be ready for the world of ninja if they can't even understand the basics of what it means to be a Konoha shinobi. But like I said, this is only if they fail my test. If they don't, then I will gladly teach them everything I can. Mikoto just glared at Kakashi. He was underestimating her kid's ability from the start, and that was something no one did. Well, prepare to be surprised, Kakashi. My children will pass whatever test you give them, and I swear that if they are failed, then I will teach them instead. Kakashi was surprised by the response but said nothing. Now please leave. This night has gone on for too long and I have too much to think about. He stayed a moment longer, sighed, and walked past her. I hope her confidence in them is well placed, but from what I hear, those two will just make the exercise into a competition. They might never be able to work on a team if all they see in their fellow Konoha shinobi is weakness, something to be pushed around. Mikoto sighed and re-entered her daughter's room, this time for good. What Kakashi said did not shake her confidence in either of them, though. She knew that together they could solve any problem. As long as their teammate could keep up, Team 7 wasn't going anywhere. 000. Konohagakure. Uchiha Compound. Naruto's arrival home was signaled by a loud scream. All his pent-up frustrations were released as he cried and cried. He beat his fists into the floor, banged against the walls, and let his tears guide their way to his room. The stunning revelation that most definitely changed Naruto so much in so little time was too much to bear right after his first kill. He just hadn't had the time process everything. Now he was letting his frustration and sadness out at once. He loved his new family, both Mikoto and Sasuke. Being an Uchiha and living with them happily was all he ever wanted to do, so much so he forgot that they weren't his real family. Now that he heard the tale of his mother, Naruto was confused on what he should do next. Should he take the Uzumaki name? What should he consider Mikoto? A mother, an aunt, a stranger? So many questions that only he had the answer to. He dragged himself to his bed and laid out the scrolls in a mess as he just took a few deep breaths. No matter what, he wouldn't let this info of his real mother change what he felt for Sasuke or Mikoto. He wouldn't let it hurt his family. Uzumaki Kushina would be loved and missed as his birth mother, but he could only protect and love Mikoto as his mother now, so he would do so just like he promised. I just need to calm down. I'm not doing anyone any good being an emotional wreck. Naruto calmed himself and then opened the first scroll. It seemed to have some locking measures he wasn't quite sure he understood. Sensing the boy's confusion, Kyuubi decided to settle in and speak with him again. Naruto, I suggest you get an empty scroll and write those jutsu you found in it. Otherwise, you will forget them easily and waste this opportunity. Naruto remembered the scroll of sealing and knew the Kyuubi was right. From his nearby desk, Naruto grabbed the necessary tools to begin archiving the jutsu he found. With a brush and ink, he spent the next hour or so copying down all he could remember from the scroll. Kyuubi as well added his insight on the details as well as added a few things he felt the boy should know. Upon completion with his work, Kyuubi advised Naruto to keep the scroll out as they might learn a way to secure it from the Uzumaki scrolls. How do you know we will find something useful in these scrolls, Kyuubi? Did you know my mother? The beast growled in annoyance and he realized his mother was a touchy subject. I know enough of her to last a lifetime, and as I said when we first met, it will be discussed at a later date. For now, just accept my age comes with knowledge of many things. One of them, your clan, the Uzumaki. They were known for sealing techniques, something we can apply to lock that scroll would most definitely be in their reach. Naruto wasn't satisfied with Kyuubi's answer but knew he could not argue with him. Fine. But I'm not sure how to go about opening this scroll. It says, blood, and lock, in kanji, but will my blood work? The beast hummed in thought as they deciphered the scroll containing ancient knowledge. Either it's designed to work for a certain group of blood types or certain people. Seeing as how you weren't born yet so they couldn't add your blood to the lock, I figure it's probably any Uzumaki blood that will do. Either way, you have a 50-50 shot of opening it. He didn't like those odds considering the importance of the scroll's knowledge, but it was a gamble he had to take. Okay. Here goes nothing. Naruto sat on his bed in front of the scroll as he bit his finger and allowed the blood to drip onto the parchment. Instead of soaking through, it lit up and a chakra spike signaled the lock's release. The ink and blood disappeared to form new writing that spanned the entire length of the scroll. Naruto was overwhelmed by the knowledge and glanced over everything he could. It seemed the first scroll was a basic history of his mother's clan. Where they came from, how they lived, their past battles, greatest triumphs, most bitter defeats, all at his fingertips. You have all night to read this petty history book, boy. Move on to the other two, we must prioritize our time. So taken up in excitement, Naruto realized that they had a limited time to see everything there. He quickly opened up the other three and saw they contained even more useful information. One contained info on something similar to an Uzumaki Kekkei Genkai while the other two contained an entire scroll worth of information on the Uzumaki's unique Suiten and Fuinjutsu techniques. The bloodline trait incredibly interested Kyuubi but Naruto seemed to wander to all four, not sure which one to focus on first. I can learn how to harness the smallest amount of precipitation into a deadly whirlpool or I can learn how to stop an entire army with just a single seal. If I understand how to use my Kekkei Genkai on my mother's side, there is no telling what I can accomplish. The tailed beast realized neither could get anything done in this sense, so he decided it was time the boy rested. Naruto, while I'm sure this is quite overwhelming for you, right now is a time for rest. We can go over this in more detail tomorrow. For now, we can pack it up to review later. The wise advice made him hesitate and realize he truly was tired and considering everything that had happened, it was best he got some rest. The scrolls weren't going anywhere and he would learn nothing while he had a weary mind. It also wouldn't do him any good to see his family in a tired state. You are right, Kyuubi, I will put these away for safekeeping. The beast grumbled assent and it too fell into slumber, this time because it wanted to and not because it had no other choice. He stowed the scrolls underneath his bed. In a small crawlspace he found Itachi must have stored things. So far he had found nothing but it wouldn't surprise him if the elder Uchiha didn't leave a few things behind. With nothing else to do, the blonde got back into bed and fell into an anxious slumber. 000. Morning. Kanahagakure. Uchiha compound. Front gate. Are you sure you can walk on your own, Sasuke-chan? I can hell. Ka-san. I can walk by myself. Leave me alone already. The two Uchiha women arrived at the gate of their compound after so much fuss getting there from the hospital. Mikoto was just being a concerned mother, but her daughter would have none of that. Her limp barely showed and it wouldn't last long with the great treatment the doctors gave her. If only her mother could see that, but unfortunately she was too overprotective for her own good. She almost felt like just staying at the hospital to get Mikoto off her back, but she had to come home and see Naruto, to make sure he was okay. Today is the day we meet Sensei and our teammate. This sore feeling had better go away before too long. Sasuke grumbled in her mind as they came into view of Naruto, who was waiting for them near their house. Hey Ka-san, Suki-chan. Are you two alright? The two women smiled at his greeting and joined him by the door. Naruto. Sasuke hugged him tight, not wanting to let go. The blonde was confused at first, but then he understood and wrapped his arms around her. Sasuke hadn't seen him after he went after Mizuki. All that time she must have had so many fantasies of what happened, and then she fell asleep without knowing the outcome of the battle. She must have been very worried. I guess I can't be too hard on her for making such a cute face. Mikoto just smiled as the two embraced. Her children were so cute, the way they got along so well. It wouldn't surprise her at the rate they were going before they were kissing in public and doing things a couple would do. Naruto was a bit shy and Sasuke preferred privacy to those types of things, but, call it mother's intuition, she sensed the two would make an exception for each other. I was so worried, you baka. She hit his chest, tears soaking his black high-collar top. Naruto frowned. He hated to see her so broken up over him. I didn't mean to, Sasuke. I just couldn't let him get away with what he did to you. Sasuke knew why he did it, but it angered her that he went on without her, leaving her behind. We do things together from now on, understand? She looked up at his eyes so innocently that he had no choice but to smile and nod. Anything for you, Sasuke. Her playful side won for a moment at how happy she was with his answer. Naruto's happiness was replaced by utter surprise when she kissed him on the lips, a fleeting peck. Good boy. Now wait here with Ka-san while I change into my new clothes. Naruto just watched, dumbfounded, as the girl walked to the front door. Mikoto was wowed as her daughter led Naruto on with a cute turnaround in the door and a wink before disappearing to her room. If nothing else, it kept Naruto from saying anything, allowing Mikoto to get her bearings. She didn't want to pry, but she had to know what Naruto's decision was after last night and his time alone. Naruto-kun, how did last night go? The blonde awoke from his daze and turned to face his mother, feeling a bit playful himself with her bashful look. What do you mean, Miko-chan? The use of the nickname gave her hope, but she dared not spoil it, wanting to hear it from his mouth. Did you come to a decision? After reading about your mother, Kushina. Mentioning her friend in such a depressing manner made her head fall to the ground in shame. This was it. Surely Naruto no longer wished to stay with them. Being a proud Uzumaki would be his choice, to carry on his mother's legacy and revive the long-dead clan. What boy would not dream of such a destiny? Why? I'm staying here with my family. What made you think otherwise, Ka-san? Mikoto looked up in shock to meet his eyes, surprised by his utter pride in the fact. But, Naruto. Your mother Kushina? Naruto smiled reassuringly. It seemed his mother needed as much persuasion as he did. My mother, Uzumaki Kushina, will be dearly missed, and I will do everything I can to make her proud of me. What kind of shinobi would I be if I left those who need me the most behind? What kind of son would I be to leave my mother? Mikoto betrayed herself and brushed a tear away. It seemed Naruto saw through them better than others could. He knew just how to answer her worst fears with reassurance. Thank you, Naruto. I know it may be selfish, but. Mikoto smiled with teary eyes at her son, her true son. I want you to stay with Sasuke and me. Kushina was a great friend of mine and I hope she will understand these feelings. Naruto joined his mother in an embrace, bringing her as close as he could. The action surprised her, but she quickly returned the hug and listened as he spoke. Ka-san will understand. The Uzumaki will be reborn again with the Uchiha, just as the Uchiha were reborn 6 years ago. This time, we are one family now. Mikoto just smiled and hugged him tight, glad that he was willing to stay. Oh Naruto, you know just what to say to make Ka-san happy. Ahem. They quickly separated to find Sasuke standing in the doorway again, this time with her hands on her hips and an accusing glare sent at the two. While Mikoto was a bit embarrassed of the situation they were caught in, Naruto couldn't take his eyes off of the girl's new clothes. She now joined him in wearing an Uchiha black high-collar shirt, but hers was cut at the midriff to show her perfect stomach. Going lower, she wore a small skirt that adorned the Uchiha symbol along its sides and covered only about to her thighs, and going even farther revealed long black leather boot sandals that clung tightly to her legs. The last obvious change was her headband that, instead of being tied to her forehead, was worn around the neck. Did I catch you two at a bad time? She asked sarcastically, eliciting an awkward laugh from her mother and practically a nosebleed from Naruto as he checked out her new outfit. A smirk formed in her mind as she watched him. It seems my new taste in clothing is also liked by Naruto. I suppose that makes up for the fact that Ka-san almost went too far with my Naru-kun. Even with my skill, I can't compete with her yet. No, of course not, Sasuke-chan. Naru-kun and I were just. Suki-chan. Ka-san was hugging me because she was still worried about me after yesterday. You know how clingy she is. Naruto saved his mother the trouble of explaining when it was his fault anyway. Satisfied with the answer, Sasuke let it drop and began to walk out the front gate toward the village. Naruto looked at Mikoto and, when she gave an approving nod and smile, ran off after her to go see their new sensei. A sudden sinking feeling in her gut came about when she thought of the Jonin Kakashi and what he said. That was when she saw what made her almost jealous of her young daughter. The two entwined their hands as they left the safety of the compound to the exposure of the outside world. Mikoto smiled. Everyone would look at them now, and they all would know where the true strength of the reborn Uchiha came from. Their love for one another will beat any obstacle, just as my love will protect them for as long as I live. Speaking of that, Mikoto had important business to attend to with the Hokage. It was time she made a more notable inquiry on a specific pair of eyes she wanted for a long time. 000. Kanahagakure. Ninja Academy. The entire class went quiet as the two Uchiha arrived. Rumors had already spread throughout the school about their escapades last night. When everyone saw their hands together, it seemed the class would be in an uproar in jealousy. Naruto and Sasuke ignored them and took their spots in the corner of the classroom away from the idiots and drama queens. That was something Naruto had to appreciate in Sasuke. Even though she was popular, she didn't bother to pursue it. He liked staying out of the spotlight and was glad his sister agreed to the idea. Sakura and Ino just looked at the two and sighed in envy, what they wouldn't give to have a chance to hang out with either of them. They were leeches that thrived on popularity, but they were starved dry by the Uchiha who let no one near them. Kiba growled. He promised one of these days he would teach Naruto a lesson and get Sasuke for himself, an alpha male claiming his mate from a pitiful mutt. He's just posing as an Uchiha, he's not worth mating with her. I'll show her after I kick his ass. For now though, Kiba was at least smart enough to know not to take on Naruto with her around. She was liable to jump in. Shino and Shikamaru had watched the two come in with a neutral or lazy attitude to it all. Shino looked at the Uchiha prodigies as worthy Konoha ninja as well as a good challenge. Shikamaru just saw them as the cause of his headache every morning. If I have to hear about those two one more time, I might just ask my dad to teach me more Nara cage techniques. Luckily he was saved from too much of an uproar when the homeroom teacher came in. Many of the students were silently questioning where Mizuki was, as he usually came in along with Iruka. Their parents most likely did not tell them anything specific, especially as it was only Jonin that were debriefed on the situation. Iruka watched as their eyes darted around the classroom and their minds wandered. It looked like he would have to make a class announcement. Mizuki will not be joining us any longer in the classroom as he was found to be a traitor to the Hidden Leaf. Last night he was killed before he could leave the village with important documents. They gasped. Who would have thought he was a traitor all this time? Even more interesting, who was the one that killed him? Naruto's hand scrunched into a fist and his face scrunched up, remembering last night. Sasuke immediately noticed and put her hand over his, giving him an understanding smile. Iruka noticed the two Uchiha in the comforting gesture as his eyes wandered to check on them. They had been key figures on that night. He smiled as it looked like they would pull through just fine. All right, quiet down. Let this be a lesson to always be vigilant. Even someone you know and trust can change, sometimes for the worse. They quieted down and took in his lesson as the grave example was enough for most to understand. Well, enough of this talk. Today should be an exciting day since I have the list of genin teams right here. Iruka smiled and held up the clipboard, eliciting a cheer from the students. Naruto and Sasuke stayed quiet, patiently waiting for their names to be called as the teams were listed off by Iruka. Sakura Haruno was on a team with Hyuga Hinata and Inuzuka Kiba, with their team captain acting as Jonin Kurenai Uehi. Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru, and Akamichi Choji were on team under Asuma Sarutobi. Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Uchiha Naruto, and Aburame Shino under Jonin Kakashi Hatake. Iruka looked up from his list as he read off the last team to see the reactions. Eyes were darting between the three called as they looked nonchalant. And Aburame HMPH. He better not get in our way. I never really got to understand Shino. Looks like this will be a good chance to. 2 Uchiha. Quite an interesting team indeed. You were right, father. Well, that does it for the team list. Now I think it's time you meet your teachers. Iruka motioned toward the door and shouted. Come on in. The door slid open and in came a half a dozen jonin to pick up their students. Naruto eyed the one teacher, Uehi Kurenai, and expertly hid a blush with his folded hands. The woman was beautiful with her piercing red eyes and charcoal black hair. He was thankful Sasuke couldn't see as she was too preoccupied trying to find their teacher but did not see him. Damn it, where is this guy? It wasn't long before everyone but Team 7 and Iruka were left, and he soon left too. Hehe. I hear Kakashi-san is known for being a bit tardy. I will be in the teacher's lounge if you need me, otherwise please be patient. And with that, the three silent ninja were alone with each other. Shino cut a sideways glance at them as they did the same, staring at one another before simultaneously standing up and coming to stand next to each other at the front of the room. Shino, Naruto, Aburame, Uchiha. Their quick greetings showed how little they knew of one another, partly because neither side was exactly social with the other. Still, Naruto wished Sasuke would get along a little better with their new teammate instead of seeing him in some clan rivalry. At the very least they could boast they have the same cool attitude, other than Sasuke's hot temper at times. Looks like we get the lazy teacher. Geez. Naruto leaned against the front desk as the other two just stared each other down. Naruto shook his head and sighed. This was gonna be a long day. 000. Kanahagakure. Hokage Mansion. How can you tell me you don't know? I addressed this problem years ago and have given ample space for your investigation and you can't find a pair of eyes. Two dangerous eyes in the wrong hands. Mikoto yelled at the two advisors as the Hokage sat in his desk and they stood at his sides. The Uchiha matriarch continued to push for a further investigation on the disappearance of Uchiha Shisui's eyes upon their initial findings of nothing. It seemed as if any records of his body being recovered from the river were non-existent. I'm sorry Mikoto-san, but our current investigation has still turned up nothing. We had Shisui Uchiha's body moved directly to the morgue after its recovery. I even remember giving the order. But we cannot find documentation. We have no leads either as no spy activity has been detected nor were any unauthorized personnel allowed anywhere near the body. Mikoto couldn't believe their incompetence but knew that yelling would do nothing. I will remember this injustice Hokage. And you as well counselors. They received her words and glare in stride but the impact was still noticeable. Uchiha Dono, we are doing all we can. Please bear with us as you know we did not want this outcome either. Homura ground out in comparison to his previous conversations with the Uchiha which were in a more pleasant tone. Yes, all you must worry about now is fulfilling the CRA agreement as we approach the deadline for Sasuke-chan. Are you sure that they will be willing to procreate? Mikoto almost growled, gripping the chair she stood behind tightly. It is not my place to force them to do anything they are not ready to do. All I can say is that they are now in a relationship other than brother and sister. However fast they progress through this is not my business to say. The elders weren't satisfied but said nothing in return, and the Hokage just nodded. Enough of this tense conversation. I don't believe Mikoto's presence here warrants an argument every meeting. Now, let's go over Kakashi's plan for your children, Mikoto-san. I'm sure you will be interested. She felt a chill at the sound of his name but ignored it, instead feigning interest. Yes, she said with a fake smile. I would love to hear what John and Hitaki's plan is for them. 000. So glad I got this done. Feels like it took forever and I'm not sure if I should have ended it here or not, but I really wanted to get this out before I go to bed. Now I can get back to my assassin story, which I'm really excited about, and I hope that more of you will get into and enjoy, especially if you love Assassin's Creed or redhead romance. But you came here for Blonde Uchiha and I hoped you